Welcome to the Growth Whispers podcast, where everything that Brad and I talk about, that's Kevin and Brad and Kevin, everything that we talk about is about building enduring great companies. That's companies where the leader, the CEO, president, whatever you want to call him or her, and the team build a company that lasts for generations and does incredible things on this wonderful planet of ours. Joined today, as always, with Brad Giles, my co-host. Brad, how you doing today?
I'm doing lovely today. Really, really well.
Lovely.
Autumn in Perth, a lovely time of year, and things are good. I'm pretty happy, pretty comfortable. I'm pretty comfortable.
Awesome and lovely. That's just such a sweet term. Almost some a little bit of British in there. It's a nice word. I'd say I'm doing pretty good today too. The sun is out in Vancouver, and let me tell you, it feels like we're in the middle of summer. It's April, and it was 24 degrees today.
Whoa.
So this weekend, I got to get outside, got out on my motorcycle, got out in the car with the top down, and it's just like heaven. Just absolutely amazing. The whole city is out. Even walking by the beach, or driving by the beach actually, and all the takeout restaurants, the biggest lines I've seen, it's like everyone is out soaking it up, and it feels awesome. So today what do we'll talk about a word of the day first of all, and then we'll get into today. So Brad, what's your word of the day or your phrase of the day?
Look, it's people today, and specifically people because our city went to 100% venue capacity, which meant that on Thursday, I went to an actual real live concert with a performer called Missy Higgins, which was fantastic. Fantastic just to be out, amongst people, live music. And then on Friday, I went to a football game with 60,000 other people. That we had 100% capacity at our local venue here. So it's just people is my word for the day.
And how does it feel to be in a crowd with that many people? It's been a long time for me, Brad.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's really nice. We've had a long time building up to it. So we started, I think, at like 20%, then went to 50%, and 70%. And it really is feeling quite familiar, or back to normal in a sense. So that didn't feel too strange. But I'm in an area which, let's just say it's like a box area, so there's not as many people. And then we did go down, to the front row area to have a look, and it was absolutely jam-packed full of people, and no one had a mask, of course, not one person that I saw. So that was it. It was a little bit strange to be in such a crowded environment again, but good.
Awesome. Well, my phrase of the day is vitamin D. And I think that's the one you get from the sun.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure it's the one you get from the sun. And it's just amazing how spectacular. And for those of you that aren't from Vancouver would know that we get a lot of cloud and rain here. And we do get, the summers can be beautiful, but the off season can be a little gray. And the amount of just looking out and just seeing how beautiful it is out there, it's soul lifting and inspiring, and it feels great. And you can see the whole place comes alive. I mean, more people are out than ever. So vitamin D and the value of it. And I used to get a lot more of it when I would travel. I worked in the Middle East for years, and a lot of time in California, time in Hawaii, and lots of other places, never mind vacations. And so getting it in my hometown feels darn good, and I'm very grateful for it. So speaking about people and vitamins, what are we talking about today, Brad? What is the show about today?
Yeah, we've got a different episode today. So quite a break from the norm. Often we're talking about one subject and how do you solve that subject. But we introduced this concept of the people magnet machine previously. And we've spoken about that a couple of times. And we've had about a dozen questions about that we've brought together to try to answer today. So, yeah, we're talking about what does it mean to build a people magnet machine?
Yeah, perfect. And we're going to go through these questions and we're both going to kind of share our perspectives on them to give some other ideas and context for people that are interested. I mean, I hope you're interested in building a people magnet machine because, if you want to build an enduring great company, you need lots of great people to make that happen. And people make our lives wonderful, or the opposite. So let's jump in, Brad.
Okay, question number one. Why do you believe, as you say, you can't build an enduring great business without great people? Why do you
Mhm.
believe that you can't build an enduring great business without great people? Kevin.
Well, you actually might be able to, or at least you could build an enduring, okay business. You could, like, there is a chance, and we're not about, it's like if we were gamblers, we'd be card counters, i.e., we'd want to put the odds in our own favor. I'm not a gambler. I'm not a card counter, but the idea is there's a slight chance you could, but the odds are dramatically against you because good people build good or mediocre companies. It's because of their wiring. Great people have the great thinking and the great skills and the great execution to build a great company. So it's very, I think there's always exceptions, but it's very, very unlikely because what happens is a company gets filled with good people and then more mediocrity starts to creep in and more bureaucracy creeps in and the organization just gradually fades and then they get bought out or something else happens. They're not not around for the long time, or they're not a leader for the long term. So it's like, look, because generally you kind of need to, and because those great people or continue to do the things to make the company continue to be great and to be around. Brad, what about you? What would you add
Look,
to that?
what I love that you said there is that the odds are dramatically stacked against you. Uh,
Yes.
and and we're both great fans of the work by Jim Collins. And in the work that he's done, it's simply a numbers game. If you don't understand your values, if you don't understand what high performance look like, if you don't hold people to high standards, if you don't do all of the work and you kind of bumble along, and you might be good, the data says that you'd have a much lower chance of enduring on sticking around for the long term, and you might be bought out. So yeah, so I think in answer to the question, you can't do it because that's what the research tells us. And if you want to outlast the competition, if you don't want to be bought out, if you want to survive for the long term, you're going to have to surround yourself with great people. The only other point about that is that you spend a lot of time working on repairing the damage that is done by mediocre people. You spend a lot of
Yes.
time, yeah, you spend a lot of time working not on the good parts of the business, but on the bad parts. How can we solve the fact, ultimately that we haven't got great people in these seats?
Yeah, and you end up spending more time managing down or overseeing stuff that you don't have to do with great people. It consumes more of your time as a leader, and you're less likely to focus on the forward-looking things that will make your company stronger in the future because you're stuck in a day-to-day because your people aren't great. The other thing to think about is, if in doubt, look to professional sports. Professional sports put an exorbitant amount of energy into making sure that they have the best people, period. And they have massive systems for the best people. And people aren't performing at their best. They don't play the game, or they don't even stay on that top team and they get pushed down. So it's not rocket science, but that's enduring great, like an enduring great sports franchise. All right, let's go on to number 2. What do you mean by a people magnet machine? And it kind of had a flash as I was reading that, Brad, of of Scooby-Doo and the Mystery Machine. Did you ever
Yes,
the
yes, I thought
Mystery
the
Machine?
same.
Did
Yeah.
you? That's hilarious. So Scooby-Doo was a hilarious cartoon. I watched, probably too much growing up as a kid. They had their van called the Mystery Machine. So it's not a mystery machine. We're not hiding all of our people in the back of the van, and goblins aren't going to come out and be in the haunted house like there always seem to be in Scooby-Doo. What we're talking about is a company that continually attracts awesome people to it. The best want to work there, and some of the best are also developed there. It's not just about hiring great people, it's also developing. So imagine a bunch of cogs in a machine, and one of them brings in new people that become great. Another one brings in great people already into the existing system, and there's this ecosystem of awesomeness. So it's got a great big magnet to attract people towards it, and it's a machine that makes people better.
Yeah. And the only thing I'd add to that is if you think about a business as being a machine, and I've kind of said before a few times that this is a machine that spits out $100 bills. Okay.
Yeah.
If you make it work that way. Now, unfortunately, some businesses that people build, you need to put $100 bills into it. You just need to keep putting them in, and it never gives you anything back. They're the businesses that unfortunately lose money. Well, ideally, we're making a machine that spits out $100 bills consistently. And it's all of the work that we do that gets that to happen. So if we think about the concept of the business as being a machine that people work in, we want it to be a machine that attracts, exactly like you said, a machine that attracts people, but not just attracts people, it's like a magnet. They can't help but be drawn towards it. You get two magnets and try to pull them apart. You can't do it. It's a magnet-like attraction.
Exactly. So it pulls them there and it keeps them there, and that is perfect. And by the way, Brett, could I request that we build ones that have $1,000 bills? Maybe not 100. I prefer the $1,000 bill machine than the $100 bill machine.
If you go to Zimbabwe, you can have one that makes a $1 billion bill. Unfortunately, it doesn't last that long.
I am sure.
So
don't go out in the rain. Okay, good. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's what we're saying. You can't build an enduring business unless in some form you build a people magnet machine, because you're not going to be able to attract and retain great people. Let's go on to number 3. You recommend that employers share their greatness using a story. Define a greatness story, and can you give us an example?
Yeah, why would you want to let people know the awesome stuff that you're doing? I mean, come on, that's just craziness. Yes, of course we want to share those stories. And, it's interesting. I have seen so many different versions, and it depends on the culture of the company. Some organizations are very humble. I mean, many are humble in a way where they don't like to talk about themselves very much.
Yeah.
Others still have humble leaders, but they have a strong PR machine, or a machine of telling the story. So I'm not saying it's not about humility, but there's lots of great examples of what people do. And if you would look at, unfortunately he's no longer with us, but Tony Hsieh built an amazing culture at Zappos. And not only did he write an excellent book on it called Delivering Happiness, he would do tours of their place of work, of their offices, which are wild because people had lots of autonomy to how they decorated their offices. They had a culture of fun and engagement, which transferred through to their customers. He spoke about it. I've been at conferences where Tony spoke and shared about what they did. So he has done an amazing job. What are some other ones? I mean, and there's many more, but that is one that was, very impactful, and he taught a lot of people about that a lot through what he was doing. How about yourself, Brad?
I did the tour of Zappos on a quick note in Las Vegas when we were there, and it was just a fantastic insight into happiness. But to the question, well, I think that it's a bit like brushing your teeth. Okay, and this is you need to always help people to understand the greatness through stories. And we connect that to core values and core purpose. So,
Yep.
one of the exercises I do in quarterly workshops that I run with teams and annual workshops is ask the question, so can you tell me something great that someone has recently done in the past quarter or the past month? And someone will always come up with something. Now, which core value or core purpose does that connect to? And so building a rhythm and a habit around those stories, and
Yep.
really a legacy that we can draw upon in the future to help new employees understand the values and the purpose through lived stories.
Yeah, we just had a meeting last night with one of our clients last week, and we do strategy meetings. We every quarter do a survey, and we ask people about highlights that people, if the great things people did, and the core value linked to. It's part of our system we do, and we gather those. The client last week, they go through and ask for stories about every single core value, which they then go back and share with the whole team. Other ones, interesting about in terms of sharing the macro story. So sharing of the value stories are awesome and a great part of a culture. Another client we work with in India, Ashiana Housing, their father Gupta has started the company, and he had passed. Now the three brothers are running it, but one of the brothers, did a whole biography on his father, sharing his story. And not only was it a act of love and appreciation towards his father, but then the stories of how he built the company are able to stay alive as part of the legacy of the company as well.
And that storytelling is so important because as humans, we connect with stories.
Yes.
Before there was Excel spreadsheets, before there was computers, before there was even the written word, the only way we could communicate was by telling and recalling stories. And that's the
Yes.
way that our brain best connects lived behaviors and legacy and what to do and what not to do. Don't go near the big black snake is the story. That big black snake could cause you harm.
Yes.
You know
And
what I
there's
mean?
another big black snake in our world these days, and it's called Glassdoor. It's where people go to share their stories when they're not happy with an employer. And some people have made some pretty um, extreme accusations about Glassdoor and their business model. A lot of people do not like it.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't dug enough behind the scenes, but what I know is you need to continue to share your great stories, because there's often somebody who want to share bad stories, and whether they're true or not is a whole separate conversation. But there are forums out there where people can share the bad ones, and as a company and as a brand, we want to make sure we continue share those great stories, the positive stories. And particularly, I find reaching back sometimes into the heritage and founding of the company. Some of the best brands in the world, I'm a big fan of Porsche as a brand and the way they do things.
Yeah.
They're understated, amazing, amazing product that they make. But they always reach back into the archives, and they'll talk about races in the early years or early models. They'll highlight a car from the 60s that they built and go back. So they kind of, looking back and looking forward. Point is, bring in the heritage of the company into the stories they tell as well.
Awesome. So let's move on. Number 4.
Yeah.
Two parties come to the table in an employment relationship, the employee and you, the employer. Tell us about what makes an ideal employee and what makes for an ideal employer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess
I
we
love this
really,
one. This is
we really only look from the employer perspective, because if you want to be an ideal employer, there's certainly you can't really change who you are. You can't really change. You can't become Apple overnight, for example. You can certainly adapt and implement systems to become a better version of what you're doing, and we encourage that at every turn. But specifically, what makes an ideal employee? Well, I have written about this extensively in my book, Made to Thrive, the ideal. And you and I have spoken about this concept before. You and
Yep.
I originally started talking about it many years ago. And so my thoughts are, you've got an ideal customer. Who's the customer that you'd like to serve? And you have an ideal employee. And that really comes about by understanding who is the employee, that if they were on your bus in your company, they would be most living their own personal hedgehog. Okay. So they would be living their purpose. They would be doing what they're the best at. Who is that kind of person? So that if you can think about the bus, you're the leader standing at the front, looking back at the bus, and the whole bus is the company's hedgehog. And as you look down all of the seats, there are all of these people who are living their own personal hedgehog. Well, that's an ideal theoretical model, but
Yes,
the point is, the ideal employee is going to align with your company purpose. Okay. And they're going to also align with what you can be best at, and your kind of brand promise as well. So that in a way, you've got the people who absolutely love doing what you are doing and what you can be the best at. So yeah, for me, I think that that's one of the reasons that we spend more time hiring and less time firing. We want to get the best people, but maybe the people who aren't the best could be the best somewhere else. Kevin, what's your
yeah.
thoughts?
I'm trying to think of how to make a real simple response. And it's, imagine you're just going to have a great big party and you got your friends there. And your friends that you naturally get along with. And even the ones you might not have seen for years, but you naturally get along with them and you can count on them and you understand what they're good at and understand what they're not. Well, that's kind of like an ideal employee. First of all, they're the people you want at the party. They naturally get along with all of your friends, as a kind of a proxy for the rest of your team. They're really good at what they do, and you have a good sense of what they do and what they don't. And that's really all it is, because a great team is a collection of people who are all weird in a similar way. They're all on a similar wavelength, and the ideal employee naturally fits in with what you need. And that's hard to do. And that's why, like you said, we spend a lot of time defining clearly what is the job, what is the excellence required in the human to thrive in this particular role, and then what's all the other stuff around it that is needed. So, for example, we're hiring a CFO right now, helping to hire a CFO for one of our clients. He is an outstanding entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, driven as hell. Spectacular business, like everything about it's awesome. So this person not only needs to be a spectacular CFO, able to drive a very technical and compliance oriented back end of a company, but they got to be able to work with our awesome but very entrepreneurial CEO.
Yeah.
So the ideal employee is not about the skill sets they have alone. That is important, and their experience is important. The personality fit with the CEO is important, but they also have to be able to work with an entrepreneurial CEO. So there's a lot of variables at play. So the question is that situational, and it's worth time and energy to figure it out. And I've seen so many times where someone that could have been ideal somewhere else can't because of the company. Like I've seen, even I go to executives. There's executives who can report to an entrepreneurial CEO, and then there's those that can't. Those that can't might be able to be an executive somewhere else, but they probably would need to be a notch down or a director of that company. So anyway, Natural fit, great for the party, if it metaphorically, don't take a lot of management, and they're thrilled that they get the opportunity to work with you, and you're thrilled you get the opportunity to work with them. That's kind of setting the bar pretty high, but that's what we aim for.
Well, it's ideal. It's not, it
is.
Yeah.
One thing that we do, Brad, on it, so I forgot to say, and you mentioned it, I think, but we come up with what we call an employee promise.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is it that we offer that is different than other roles out there? Because every environment has something different to it. It's like every dish that a chef puts up has, they write those nice little descriptions of the dish. Well, every company has a very different environment and culture. So we've coming up with 2 or 3 major things. They say, here's what you're going to get here. And then it might be different than other places. is a way to try and help this process as well. And people either run towards that or away from that in some cases too.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Mhm.
interesting. And that an employee promise does not mean, so we've got good pay. We've got health insurance and we're going to
No,
give you 4 weeks off per year. No, that
no.
is definitely not it.
That's called a
And
job. A job has all those things. And almost every company offers identical things.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so we're
Yeah,
going to have to,
I'll give the example. I'll give you an example. A company we work with,
yeah,
and theirs was you get a lot of autonomy, um, lots of opportunities to grow, and you get to work with an amazing group of high performers. So
yeah.
high performing colleagues, autonomy, opportunities to learn and grow.
And if that
And
was explained to you during the interview process, it's drawing the candidate like a magnet, which is exactly what we want.
exactly.
Exactly what we want.
Or repelling them like a magnet if the polarization is backwards.
Absolutely.
Right. Because
Absolutely.
that company, for example, at one point had 91% A players.
Yeah.
And so if you were not a high strung high performer, you would get crushed, like trampled.
Yeah.
And they're making it very clear, if you're awesome, come play with us.
So in my book, Made to Thrive, I talk about Southwest Airlines employee promise. And I looked quite deeply into their job adverts and what they do. And it's subvert, like it's not overt. It's kind of between the lines, but it's lots of love for our team. It's lots
Yeah.
of fun, and it's a collaborative team environment. Like you can count on your team members to help you out.
Yep.
And that's the
Awesome.
secret sauce that helps them to deliver their brand promise, which is lots of love, lots of flights, and lots of fun. So that's the kind of connection through
Awesome.
there. So let's move
Awesome.
on to number 5. How do you recommend employers go about marketing to attract A players? Interesting question. How do you recommend employers go about marketing to attract A players?
Well, to answer it, we first got to start with, how do we normally find our A players?
And before that, do you know what? I think A players don't respond to adverts because they're not in the market, because they're highly in demand. Most A players are going to be poached or are going to be headhunted rather than responding to a job advert. And that's a really important cornerstone to begin this conversation with.
It is. And I was going a different road to the same place, Brad, which is, we got to look at where they come from. Normally, many of them come from relationships, right? Where we have known them or other people on the team have known them.
Yes.
And so if we know that the source, always go back and look at where your best people come from. Same with your customers. And if you go back and trace your steps, you'll find a lot of it came from a lot of them for most companies. Maybe yours is different, right? And so it's some relationship, someone worked with them before often, or went to school with them, or knew them. And if that's the case, then we need to grease that channel, or work that channel, or leverage that channel of the relationships. And for most companies, what we try, and it's hard, is to get both the CEO and the key leaders to continually reach out to their networks.
Yes.
Building up a bench of interested people that are ready to come in at some time. But it's no different than prospecting for new clients. It's like prospecting for new employees. The challenge is most people don't put the energy into it, right? And as a result, so when they don't have anything in a prospect system, then they got to spend a lot of time and energy quickly going and trying to find someone. And then you end up just spending a lot of money to get a recruiter to go and do that for you, because the recruiter already has a warm network generally. And but if we're cold, it's very, very challenging to do. So yeah, it's tapping into relationships and trying to find ways to get the team to put time into that proactively.
There's no substitute for a virtual bench. It's as simple as that. There's no substitute for Marketing is important, I think, in advocating the employee promise. It's in advocating,
Yep.
this is what we stand for. So you and I have mentioned before, I used to own, one of the business I owned was a job board. Okay. So like monster.com or Seek if you're Australian. And I got to see virtually the same job advert, almost the same words. Okay. And the traffic was the same, everything was the same, but the amount of people that clicked on the advert because of the employer brand was like 100 times different. It was remarkable. And it all comes back to what is your employer brand? Now, you may think, oh, one was a big company and one was a small company. That's not what I'm talking about. You could have companies that were, let's say, multinational and known. It was the employer brand off the bat that was making a substantial difference. So establishing employer brand is one thing, but equally, there's no substitute for building an employee virtual bench. And that means it's the hard work, which means we don't have to rely as much on recruiters, as you said. Okay.
Yeah. And the other things that we see clients do, people do put a lot of energy, those that recruit from universities do put a lot of energy into recruiting in that and building relationships at the schools. That can be a great strategy if you bring in new recruits, and people will dedicate a lot of resource to that. And on the employer brand, like anything, companies we work with will spend a lot of time and energy on LinkedIn, sharing good content, building their networks, and even LinkedIn as an example if they're recruiting a higher level executive piece as where they're doing some of their employer brand stuff or other platforms. And the other final piece, it's a little controversial, but the other thing that companies will do is the best places to work or great places to work surveys. Now, there's consultants that help you win it. So the system can be gamed and it's a bit of a vanity contest, but it does get you to do things and it shows your desire to be a great place to work. And there's things I love about that and things I don't, and there is pros and cons, but it is something that gives almost an endorsement of potential greatness that can also help candidates feel more comfortable with you because it shows that you have an interest in or a dedication to your employees. And again, I guess I have my own concerns about it, but generally it's good marketing. Let's just say that. It looks really good. It looks good to candidates.
And we've really drifted into question 6, which is a good thing, which is, and I'm going to continue on what you said, how does a company's brand in the marketplace figure into recruiting? So you mentioned great place to work. One of the teams that I work with, Tristan, who they've won the best place to work or great place to work, I should say, for the past 10 years in a row. An amazing achievement. And, it is a great place to work. There's such a caring group of people. They always begin their emails, for example, with, Kevin, how are you today? And it's simple, but there's these times.
In that kind of voice too, Brad.
Yeah.
How are you today? Like just sweet.
Yeah. And I don't know how you do a voice on an email, but they seem to do it.
I got it.
Yeah, it's just a caring place to work.
That's awesome.
That's
awesome.
They're a physiotherapy company called the Physio Co in Melbourne. And they just, I've been working with probably 6 years, I think now, maybe 7 years. And their employer brand within the market, they always need to work on it. But what it means, like that magnet, and why we're using that magnet analogy, because in physiotherapy, you've got one group of people who are like, here's what I want to do. I want to become a sports physiotherapist and I want to be on the sideline for the athletes when they come off and do all the stuff. And I love competitiveness. And then there's another person who is more like, I want to help people to help people. Totally. And so they've got that magnet, north and south, attracting the people who are the latter. The athletes, because they specialize in aged care physiotherapy. That's their market now.
Right, which is a special Special market or different market. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my thoughts on that. Any other thoughts on
Awesome.
that, Kevin?
No, I think it's important. And going into the budget for, marketing these things, um, yeah, every company is different, but investing in things like that are helpful, and everyone will be different. But you got to put in no different than what I've seen over the years. There's energy you put into your marketing for customers. If you're going to be a great company, you have to put energy into your marketing for employees too. It's not just a side of the desk thing. They both need systems that help bring great talent to the table or great opportunities to the table.
Yeah, so that was to the question, should a company budget for investing in marketing to attract new talent? How much might that cost?
Yeah, from 0 to a billion. I don't know, depends on how many people, but it's important. And again, it depends on the scale of your company.
Well,
But
how much does attrition cost? How much does every time you
yes,
lose someone? The stats are something like for a frontline employee, it costs one time their salary to replace them. By the time you hire, recruit, train, onboard, all of the stuff to get them back up to speed. So, then you can go up to, I guess, 10 or 15 times for an executive level role.
it can be. No
so
matter what, it's there. Yeah, and I don't have a stat on what it is, but it needs, if you're going to continue to add more people, somehow you're going to do it through money or through labor or through paying recruiters to do it. Either way, somehow you got to do it, and it's an important part of your growth engine, because people's growth is usually limited by their access to talent. That's what we find a lot, is access to great talent is what limits their growth or limits their sanity, because the stress kicks in when they don't have enough of the right people.
Yeah. So if you're not getting enough A players apply, and notwithstanding what we've already said about the virtual bench, and you've got an attrition rate that is very expensive, then that's where you can begin to think, well, if we were to reduce our attrition rate, like rather than having everyone leave after 14 months, we could get them to leave after 12 months. That's where you can begin to develop your budget pool from.
Yeah, I think, and you're saying leaving after 12 months is less desirable.
Yes.
Yeah. I think, okay, good. I got it backwards in my head. Okay, awesome.
No, that's because I said it backwards. That's because I said it the wrong way.
Okay, perfect. So yes, if we, instead of leaving at 14 months, we will have them leave at 24 months. Stay longer if you're good. If you're good, please stay longer. Okay, number 8. Once an employee is hired, onboarding takes place. We sure hope so. Then development. That would be awesome. Describe your vision about how companies might best onboard their new hires. Now, Brad, I know you're working on a book around this. I'll share a couple things first from the simple level that we see. First of all, when you onboard someone, 2 critical things I see. 1, have a plan. And it's more than just meet Sally in HR to get your paperwork done so you get a paycheck. Like, have a serious plan. And I know you can talk to that, very, very well. But a serious plan over a long period of time, which I know you're finding in your research. So a real detailed plan. And number 2, make sure that they don't feel the pressure to do too much too fast. Now, I get most involved in the onboarding of senior execs. And when they come on, I have the same talk with them every time. And it's like, hey, I'm so excited you're able to join this great company that I get to work with. Remember, there's a lot going on in this place, and it'll take a while to really understand it. So my expectation as the coach to the company is you take the first 3 months and you get to understand the business, understand the nuances, get to know the relationships, get to know the dynamics, truly understand it. Get in there and get your hands dirty, help out as much as you can, but we don't expect you to pull a rabbit out of the hat. We don't expect you to go and revolutionize the entire company in the first 3 months. Actually, we don't want you to. We want you to learn and then put together a plan of what you would do. But when people come in to try too hard, to do too much, too fast, it almost always ends up in a nightmare, because they have beautiful intent and they have understanding of where they come from, but they haven't learned this place yet. So my summary is a very clear plan of all the activities, and not too much too fast. Tell them just to calm down and that we don't need them to turn the world upside down in 90 days. Actually, we prefer they don't.
I agree with everything that you've said there. A couple of quick points, because I could talk about this for hours.
Yes.
Because I'm so heavily invested in writing this book at the moment. Number one, 86% of companies have a onboarding process that is 14 days or less. Okay. And the magic that comes from onboarding happens after 30 days. So the real ramp up in qualitative, impactful output happens between 30 and 60 days. And my advocation is that a onboarding process should be 90 days. And I've got a very, very specific and particular process around that. The only other thing that I'd say to close that out without having a podcast about onboarding is that onboarding is not training. Onboarding is not induction. Onboarding is about getting a person to understand three things, which is understanding the culture of the business, understanding the technical and process expectations of the business, and third is understanding their manager's expectations, how their manager defines success of that individual's role. So that's probably what I would say about onboarding for a few key points there. So let's move on to
and let's make sure we do a full episode on it, Brad. It's a very important topic. Okay, go ahead, please.
Number 9, how should employers develop and invest in their people?
Well, the first thing they should decide is whether they should develop and invest in that person or not. Not everyone should be developed or invested in if you don't think you're going to get a return. Because sometimes we've got a wrong person either in that job, or they shouldn't even be in your company. They're not a fit. So make sure you develop the one. Make sure first that this person is someone that you want to truly develop, or maybe you should be doing something different. So that's the first question. Jim Collins has an amazing 7 questions to help you make that decision. Look up Jim's 7 questions of whether you should develop or replace. So that is the first thing. But generally, should we? Of course, you should develop and invest in people. You just got to be looking for a return on that investment. And in every case, it's not, but it's almost a minimum requirement, unfortunately. And it's almost like if you buy, whether it's a jet or a boat or any piece of equipment, it requires maintenance. And in the purchase of things like boats and jets, there's a calculation and rough numbers, but it's about 5% of the initial purchase value is required for annual maintenance, period. So same thing kind of goes true for humans. There's a minimum amount of, we'll call it learning and development, that we require to stay at our best. And there's the salary is a cost, but I think it's very important. And Brad, I know you'll have lots of thoughts on this too.
Yeah. Very similar. So first of all, how should employers develop and invest in their people? Well, number 1, set a budget. And you just said 5% of salary costs. Great. So it doesn't need to be 5%, but pick a number, allocate that as a budget line item. Number 1. Number 2, who is accountable for that? All right. So
yes.
People and culture manager, or it's the managing director, or I don't know, someone has to be accountable for that. And then they've got a budget and we've got someone who's accountable. And then the third part is, where is everybody at in their growth curve? So Bob may be at a different learning and development requirement level than Jenny or whoever it is. And so each person has a next step in their career. That person who is accountable for the budget pool knows and is working alongside them, and ideally interacting with their manager as well. And that's how they're allocating the budget through internal or external learning and development curriculum.
Yeah. And don't forget yourself. Even the CEO and the senior leaders, I actually think they need it as much as or more. And if you might, in theory, if you had a 5% budget for training and development, 5% of salaries as a benchmark based on, that's based on airplanes and boats. It's not based on people. I haven't done the math in companies. So, there'll be a better source for that. But it might be that there's 2% that goes to the front line, or 3% or 4%. And on your executives, actually, I'm talking myself out of breath, because salaries go up as you get closer to the CEO. So the 5% would allow more dollars for the executives, because it's 5% of a bigger number. So I thought it might be more percentage allocation, but the allocation might not be. But those CEOs and executives need it. And we often, when we start working with companies to get them onto a path of greaterness, or back on a path of greatness, is that the executives and CEO are undereducated or underdeveloped themselves.
And that really leads into the next question, number 10. Should there be a formal leadership development program? Should you use mentors?
Well, let's split that up. The leadership development program, the answer is yeah. Now, do you run it internally, or do you outsource it, is one thing. At a certain scale, lots of companies build their own universities. But most of the times, until you get into the many hundreds of employees, many hundreds, you're better off outsourcing and having someone else do it, because you don't have enough the critical mass. Running leadership education programs, we do a program that we have provided an outsourced solution to many of our clients, but that's a lot of work. For every hour in the room, you got 10 hours of prep at least.
Yes.
And that assumes you already know the content. So should you do it? Absolutely. But at a certain size, you might internalize it. And in my view, as mentors, mentors are magic, just magical. There are people who can provide guidance. They have been there, done that, right? And guidance and wisdom. We encourage our executives to get mentors all the time. Same with the CEOs that we work with. So the answers are yes. And yes, it's just a matter of how. Brad, how about you?
The only thing I would add to that is, in terms of the leadership development program, a couple of episodes ago, we spoke about spiraling upward. We want everybody in the organization to be spiraling upward. They're getting every month, every quarter, every year, they're becoming a better version of themselves, for the reason that they can stay ahead of the growth of the business. They can, as the advisor coach, you and I need to stay ahead of the CEO and the business. The CEO needs to stay ahead of the business, and the managers or the executives need to stay ahead of the growth of the business broadly as well. So we all need to be continuing to learn as much as we can through that journey. So look, absolutely. All right, cool. On to number 11. The cost of replacing an employee can range from 1 to 2 or even more times the salary, as we spoke about earlier. When you work with a company plagued by high turnover, how do you go about diagnosing the problem? We know.
Well, first of all, the stats we've heard up to like 14 times salary for a wrong person, and that's more for a mishire, someone who hasn't worked out and done damage, which we have seen. But yes, losing good people. I mean, if you want to watch me get mad, and I'm pretty fiery to start with, but when we lose A players in the companies we work with, I get angry and I want answers. And I'm just the coach. They're not my companies, but although I feel like they are. Losing an A player is a massive sin and a massive mistake. So, it's a big thing. So, but for me, when we're plagued by high turnover, first of all, because we do quarterly surveys and we often reach down a couple layers in New York to test engagement, a couple simple questions to understand what's going on. It gives us a sense of it. So we already kind of have a clue, where we can see the trends of what people aren't happy about, especially when we split them by division. So we get a lot of data on this on an ongoing basis. But the biggest thing is always data. And the data is on two different things. The A players we lost, why did we lose them? Again, it might be through the engagement surveys or exit interviews. We're a big fan of exit interviews. And sometimes we even do them ourselves for clients if the HR we don't think can get the truth. So, and then secondly, if they're losing a bunch of people that aren't A players, then we either go back into the hiring or the onboarding process. I'm excited when a new book comes out, because it'll give us more of a benchmark to look at for what to compare their systems to. But we, you know, if you're losing a lot of people that aren't A players, which is generally good for a business, but if there's too many, that means there's a hiring problem, generally a hiring problem. But if the onboarding is broken, you may have people who could be high performers who are not looking like it because the onboarding system didn't serve them well.
One of the objectives of onboarding, okay, one of the specified objectives is to be confident that we can fire this person within the legally prescribed period of approximately 90
Yes.
days, depending on your country.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's like the ripcord on a parachute. Like, we want to know, okay, it's time to pull. This person's got to go, or yes, this person is, going to be we're confident they're going to be a high performing person in the team. So, yeah, obviously it comes back to onboarding. I think that the thing that I'm really interested about in this book is, why do people create bad cultures, which is kind of talking about the problem here. So everyone talks about, do you have a bad culture? Have you got a bad culture? Can you diagnose that you've got a bad culture? Everyone talks about that. And then we've got the antidote to solve that problem. But no one talks about, well, why do bad cultures happen in the first place? And part of my thesis is, part of my thesis is that it comes from onboarding. Like, you've got an onboarding program that's a week or 4 days.
Yep.
So yeah, all I can say,
set someone up to win.
Yeah. So how do we know the problem? We know that the problem of high turnover is there because we can see the attrition rate. We can see how many people are leaving. And then we kind of dig into departments. Is it always one manager or whatever? And then what are we doing or not doing that's creating that? So let's move on to the last one. What are your recommendations for employers to retain their best people? Oh.
We do a lot, and there's a lot. The first thing is to actually just care, because a manager should be caring for and understanding their people. Their job is to serve their people and help them to do their best work and achieve their goals. So, the first thing is to truly take an interest in and care, and that takes time. Some managers are way too busy, but understanding where they're at, asking what they need, so that is a starting concept. One of the ways that we do it is by doing quarterly talent reviews, where we go through all of our key people and look at where they're at and how do we help them to grow and thrive. And in some cases with A players, they may or may not need to grow, but they definitely need to keep thriving. And sometimes we got to do stuff for them. We unfortunately get caught up in all the problem people, and our best people often get neglect from lack of attention or lack of energy. And but we need to be careful that we don't do that. So care. Every quarter, really do an evaluation of your team and know what you got to do to sharpen up the people who aren't performing, but also to really take good care of your A's. And the best acronym for it was I heard both Mark Cuban share this with us in an event, which is KYP, Know Your People. Like, you got to be in there with them. You got to know what's going on in their world and what's good and what's bad and what's stressing them and what they're up against, so you can assist them. Another CEO, Charles, he built a company called Vega. He said something very similar. He was a very successful entrepreneur here in Vancouver, and he came to one of our retreats for a client, and he just said that with his people, you got to be really close and tight, and you got to understand what's going on. And a lot of people don't. A lot of people aren't close enough to their people, and that's one of the biggest things, I think, because then you're going to know what the issues and things are to help them. How about you, Brad? What do we think we'd recommend for
our last episode? Was the 7 hidden reasons employees leave. And we spoke about a book by Lee Branham.
Yep.
Gee, the last thing is pay. Okay, the last reason that people quit is pay. So what are all of the other reasons? Like, go back and have a listen to that episode. Have a look at Lee's book. It's fantastic.
Yep.
There's an old saying, which is people don't leave a company, they leave a manager. So, investing in your managers to care, as you said, investing in your culture, making sure that there are leadership development programs and mentors, This really summarizes a lot of the stuff that we've spoken about today and last week as well.
Yeah. And one of the big things, just make sure that you're setting them up to want to be coming to work or doing their work.
Yeah.
And that sometimes involves, as I talk about in my book, I call them toxic A's, the high performing jerks. Get them out of the damn system. Because the way that you can really lose good people is by keeping bad people, because it will drive them bonkers and create a lot of unnecessary stress in their world.
Indeed. All right. What a good chat today. Different format, answering some questions today about one subject that we'd been asked. And so let's move to close. I don't know that we need to summarize them. I think we've been through them and answered
Covered them off pretty well, Brad.
Yeah. So with that, thank you for listening. This has been the Growth Whisperers podcast. I'm Brad Giles, and as always, joined by Kevin Lawrence, my co-host. For myself, Brad, you can find me at evolutionpartners.com.au. And for Kevin, you can find Kevin at lawrenceandco.com. Thank you very much. We look forward to hopefully chatting with you again next week. Enjoy your week.